I'm Nicolas Frankel. As I mentioned, it's my first time at DevTrinity, but not my first time in Riga, so I'm very happy to be here. For a long time, I was a consultant. I was developing for companies, like as a consultant, going to different customers, and like developing, architecting, sometimes even like communicating with people. And basically what I noticed is most customers, they don't know what they want. They have very clear idea in their heads. And so in the end, it was always a problem, the same problem. They didn't know what they want and had enough. So last year I switched and now I'm a developer advocate. And if you don't know what a developer advocate is, before I told that I was paid to go to conferences and drink beer, but I stopped because people started believing it, so I work now for a company called Hazelcast. Who knows about Hazelcast? Quite a few people, that's good. So probably you know us for our IMDG product, in-memory data grids, where the main use case is caching, obviously. But now we have something else called Jet. Basically, it builds upon the IMDG, and you can do stream processing very fast because it's in memory. So if you're interested, just please ping me. So question, who is doing Java? Nobody, everybody should be doing Java. Yes, good. And who is doing object-oriented Java? Everybody. Okay, I will challenge that. Of course, I love challenges. I'm French, so I will try to show you that probably you are not doing OOP, and what's the right way to do OOP. This is I've been a teacher. I'm still a teacher, and I've been teaching object-oriented programming for some time. And this is how I showed my students what an object was. And it's very easy. Like at the core, you have the states, and at the periphery, you have the behavior. And you cannot access the state directly. You must go through the behavior. Everybody is happy with that? Everybody agrees? Not so much. No? Yes? Not so much. Well, let's pretend you all agree, and then come to me afterwards, or if you have really a strong disagreement, just tell me right now. And with object-oriented programming, basically you pass messages between the objects. And in most languages that we practice, the passing of messages is just like calling a method. And perhaps you might know about this book. And in this book, they tell about what they call object calisthenics. So basically, it's a way to improve your code so that you will be object-oriented in the end. And there are a couple of principles. First is only one level of indentation per method. So I was listening to Peter's talk, who talked about like having a flat line or mountains and stuff. Basically, if you have one level of indentation, you will be pretty flat. If you have multiple levels of indentation, you will have like peaks, and it's not great. The else keywords, if you start having else keywords, it means that probably you are not applying inheritance, which is one of the basic fundamental piece of object orientation. If you have if, it's good. If you have if and else, probably there should be like different behaviors in different classes. You probably shouldn't have like basic primitives, and in Java strings as well. So everything should be like wrapped into a domain semantics, whatever. So you shouldn't have like an int, but you should have an age. You shouldn't have like a string, but you should have a first name. You shouldn't have a string, but you should have a last name, so that basically when you have a person and have constructor with two strings, you don't know which one is the first name and which one is the last name. So if it accepts only a first name and the last name, you are sure which one is which. Collections, just like you don't have a list of books, but you have a library. So just naming the objects gives you much better understanding of the domain. One dot per line. I don't know if you happen to do blah.get.get.get.get, it's a bit of a problem. Not mentioning the fact that 0.9 is no getters and setters. No. So remember this. When I told about state and behavior, getters and setters, they are not behavior. Not at all. So if you believe you are doing object orientation with getters and setters, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work that way. Keep entities small. Well, we can discuss about how much small is, but it's a good way to think about it. And if you have more than 2 instance variables, something must be wrong, and you should probably apply the single responsibility principle. I'm not saying those rules are right or wrong. I'm just saying that if you apply those rules, in the end, by default, you will have the code that will be more object-oriented. And let's try that. Who knows about the Spring Pet Clinic? Only a couple of hands. Oh, I'm so sad. The Spring Pet Clinic basically is a sample of a Spring application that apply to a pet clinic. And if you check the codes, so again, I will show code, so don't be afraid. You have GPA. Who loves GPA? And basically, well, you have only getters and setters. This is just the epitome of anemic domain objects. There is no behavior, it's just a structure. So if you can do that in C. So not very object-oriented. If and else, well, here is one. And I think it's here. Oh, here are more. And if you, I told you one level of indentation. Here you have 2 levels of indentation. So you have an if inside a for inside a method. So 2 levels of indentation. So the basic pet clinic is not object-oriented. Who is happy with that? Who is very unhappy with that? Who is Switzerland? Because basically Swiss, yeah, non-aligned, yeah. Let's be neutral. So among you, there are nobody who is happy, 1 who is very unhappy, and 2 who are Swiss. The rest, I don't know. That's fine. So what I want to do with you right now is I have created a small project which basically is a REST API over a bank domain. Very stupid. There is nothing very mind-blowing about it. I will just run it and you will see how good I am with coding stupid demos. So now I can get all accounts. Amazing. So I have 3 accounts. Because I'm using Spring, I'm also using all the nice stuff about Spring. So basically, I provided a data.sql file. It was preloaded. I'm using H2 in memory. So everything is done for me. And then I can transfer some money from one account to the other account. Notice there is no currency because it would have been harder. And now I can try to get an IBAN which is not valid. So basically, in that case, I'm trying, where is the URL? No valid here, something like here. Oops, sorry. No valid. So I'm just calling an IBAN, which obviously is not an IBAN. And what happens is I go to the database, I check, and of course, there is no such IBAN. But if you think about it, it's pretty stupid to just go to the database to discover that there is no such IBAN, because IBAN have a validation rule. So you can check like the format of anything and check, hey, this is a valid IBAN. Then further, you can check whether it exists in the database. But here we are doing a round trip to the database just to discover what we could have found much, much earlier. So the first thing about that is we should validate that that stuff is an IBAN. So in order to validate, I have been like very, very like compliant with the Spring model. I have a controller, I have a service, and I have a repository. So I am doing like lasagna-based architecture, which is the Spring model, which is a Java EE model. I'm using Spring, but Java EE would be the same. So if you know this architecture, this lasagna architecture, where should I put the validation? Sorry? On controller, okay, I would put in the service layer, because that's normally where the business logic is. And even if you think, hey, let's do OP right now, just apply the architecture. I will put it in the service. So here I will create a validate stuff. And because I'm very lazy, I already coded everything. It's just that I don't want to do the validation myself. I'm using like commons lang. Yeah, commons validator, and there is an IBAN validator, so it's very, very easy. And here, when I get the stuff, I will validate that the IBAN is correct. And here, when I'm also transferring, I will also validate that the IBAN is correct. So I validate everything, like sort of contract-based programming. Now I make sure that everything that comes in is valid. Because I'm using Spring, I'm also using the DevTools, so normally it should be very fast to restart, or not, I don't know. Here, now, when I get all accounts, it still works. When I ask for a no valid IBAN account, tells me, hey, wrong format for IBAN, which is what I expected. So now I validate as soon as possible. Now imagine we have a lot of methods that takes IBAN, and basically we need to validate them every time. So first rule of object-oriented programming, let's really create an IBAN object. Make sense to you? Great. So I will create this IBAN class. Told you I was lazy. And I will just cut that, put that into the IBAN class, and here when I create the IBAN, I will validate that the number is correct. Now I can remove the validation here. And in the controller, when I get the string, then remember we shouldn't manage string, then I create this IBAN stuff, so I will do new IBAN. And here, I should probably also tell that it's an IBAN, but then means here that it doesn't know how to find my IBAN. So right now, we just like need to take the state, which is not super great, but we will get to back to that later. And now it's an IBAN here, IBAN. And in the controller here, we need to create an IBAN from that stuff and an IBAN from that stuff. Now we can still get everything, I hope. It still works, yes. And we can still like transfer money, yes. And now I still have what I wanted, which is good. So we started creating a little object that has state, that knows how to validate. We still have this gigantic service. So normally we should try to move what is into this class to the object itself. Yes? The validation is done by the new Iban. So it's in the controller, in the lasagna architecture. It's in the lasagna architecture, it is in the controller, but the logic itself is in the domain object. Because it's in the new, I call the constructor. So if you have like, the exception will occur, yes, in the controller layer, but then I'm trying to like move all the logic from this lasagna architecture into these real objects. And my next problem is now I want to be able to get the data not from the service, but from the object. So I want to move everything into this class. So to do that, I will just do like stupid copy paste. And here, I will say here, I will find the number itself. And here, the number itself. Now I need the repository. Okay, so like I will stupidly say that I will need the repository first. Okay, I will also do the same here. So get Iban and to Iban. And now I need a controller, and it tells me, hey, I need here to pass the repository. So I will also inject the repository into this class. And that's easy. Now I can like work like that. And here I can do like that. Whoops. No, not this one, this one. What is it telling me? Transfer. Yes. This should be get. Okay, let's check if I have no compilation error. No, everything is fine. So I can still get all the accounts. I can still like change, transfer from one account to the other. I still have this no valid Iban account, so everything is still working. But you might say that, I'm injecting the controller with the repository and need to pass it to the domain object, which feels a bit weird. And then we can do something very smart and clever. What we can do is we can say that this is configurable. Who knows about this? I will show you and then I will explain you. It's very, very evil, but it works. Like most stuff. So we will say that here it's auto-wired, and I can remove it from the constructor. Now I will go to my friend and say, I don't need that anymore, I don't need that anymore, I don't need that anymore. And of course, now I don't need that anymore. I will keep it for the moment because I will need it at some point. And at this point, I will stop my application and do something like that. I will use aspect-oriented programming. So basically, every time I call a new, Spring will detect it and will say, oh, you need like a repository, I will inject it for you. You need a Java agent to do that. So for example, on your POM, you need to do something like that. So it's just like a runtime dependency and a command line change. Here I have like a dedicated configuration for that. Not this one, this one. It's just that. It's just Java agents. So basically, this is just aspect-oriented programming. Now, if I run it, amazingly, it still works. Amazing. So now you know. Put also works, everything works. Much better. Now we still have this service, but this service really, what is it doing? It's just a simple, stupid stuff calling repository.findAll. So now, finally, we can get rid of that and just in the controller. So now the repository will be used. We can remove the service itself. And here, directly call the repository. And finally, I can get rid of this bloody service, which was not super great. So put a lot of logic from the service into the entity, or the object. It's not an entity yet. Let's check if it still works without the service. Yes, it still works without the service. Who is happy with that so far? Shall we go further? Yes. Okay. So I don't need that anymore. The next step is actually very simple. We could have done it a bit earlier. I'm the one creating the IBAN, but I receive a string. Why should I do that? I mean, I should let the framework do it. So here we will say that you will receive an IBAN, and we don't need to create a new IBAN. And here as well. What we need, however, is to tell Spring how to convert from a string to an IBAN. So we will create a class which is called Iban Converter. And again, laziness rules up. Well, I mean, I don't need to type it. It's quite easy. So now if we refactor everything, recompile everything, sorry, and then we will get all accounts. It still works. And only the French one still works. Do we put? Still works. Much better. Shall I continue or do we stop there? Sorry? Continue? Well, that's good because we still have a bit of time. Okay, next is, actually here I'm still trying to find by IBAN with a string. So when I do that, I still have this number, which actually is okay because now it's encapsulated. But as soon as I go to the repository, I don't have it anymore. So what I would like to have is basically this IBAN to be like a real IBAN. Here, I should have an IBAN, not a string. In the repository, I should have an IBAN, not a string. Let's do it. So here I don't remember, I never remember. It's called column. Yes. Because it's GPA, I need to create an, like no stuff Iban constructor. And also what I need to do is here to say it's embeddable. Now it tells me, hey, what is it about? You can tell, okay, this one you shouldn't care, GPA. You should be very happy that everything is fine. And now on my account stuff, I can say here, I have an IBAN. And on my, here I have an IBAN, and here I have an IBAN. And on my repository, I can also say here, I have an IBAN. And of course here, thanks for Java to be compiled language. And here as well, probably, no, where is it? No, it's fine. And now I can get all accounts. Oh, what happened? Yes and no. The problem is here, this string is private. This string is private, so one easy way to do that is to do this string is public. And what would be the difference with a getter? I don't know, but you will tell me, so I will just create the getter here. So I will create the getter of the number. Now if I republish it, and I get all accounts, yes, I have the number, great. But you notice that right now, I have like an additional nested like structure, which I don't want. Like, why should I change my API? Why should I change my representation? Because my inner working has changed. So in order to do that, we will create a serializer that does the job that we want. So I will call it like account serializer. Zer. And now I can compile and check that everything works smoothly. Nope. What did it do? Too fast? Yes. It works again, because now I'm in control of the structure. It's not because my inner structure is X that I want to expose it. So you can like change your inner structure however you want, and then expose whatever you want. Still, we are not completely compliant with the calisthenics. Basically, we have a lot of getters. I don't like that. I want all my stuff to be nicely encapsulated. So here, for example, what I want to do, what I will do is basically I will move this like logic to the structure itself. So I will move that to the accounts, and I will have this like public, or even it can be package private, because why not? Serialize to generator JSON, so JSON generator. Yes, generator. I will copy paste my serializer here. And I will just say, hey, add exception. Here is just get ID. Here is just get amount. Here is just get IBAN. Okay, that's good. But actually, I don't need to go through a getter. I will just like simply ID, amount, and here IBAN. Guess what? Now I can remove all this craft. Get amount is where? Sorry. I need, of course, here to say account dot accounts dot serialize to generator. Still, where is it used, this get amount? Yes, it's here, so that's normal. It's still a path in the right direction. Get all accounts, too fast, yes. Put, yes, still works, everything is working, that's fine. I still have some problems. Well, depend on how you see it. But actually, this like get amount and set amount, that's not how transfer works. In general, you don't set amount on get amount on accounts. You just transfer money from one account to the other. You must be sure that everything is good. That should be encapsulated. That needs to be encapsulated. Okay, let's do that. Let's call a method transfer. That does it. Then we can remove that craft. And then in the Iban, we say from transfer to amount. Done. Let's try it. Get all. Still works. Put. Still works. Now we have reduced drastically our amount of getters and setters. Well, we can also remove ID because we don't need it anymore. Look, no getters. No getters, no setters. Amazing. Amazing. No, you are not amazed, I see it. We still have some issues. Here, for example, we can think about whether transfer, this should belong to this class or to the account class. Or we can think that, what about transactional, it will lose something. Or we still have this get number stuff because it's still used here. So probably we should also create a serialize to in the account to encapsulate everything. There is still work to do, but you understood the meaning of everything. So we went from controllers, services, and repository with all those problems into this nice object-oriented programming model with a lot of magic. Aspect-oriented programming among the first. Promises of OP is encapsulation, because remember that OP came from a time where you had global variables. So everybody could change a variable and poof, you had issues. So the promise of OP that only the object itself knows about its state, you cannot access directly, you can just like call the behavior. Code reuse. Of course, if you have code in common between two classes, I'm guilty of that myself, the first reflex is to create an abstract class, parent one, and you put the code there. There are many different ways to reuse code. Inheritance is not the best one. It's not the most natural one. Also, one of the promises of OP is that it maps to the natural world. Hey, let's create a cat class, or a car class, or a dog class. But it's not as simple. Let's create a customer class. Yeah, but what is a customer? From a marketing point of view, from a sales point of view, from a product manager point of view, those customers are completely different. So I believe we still achieve something that is like more OP because we try to apply the object calisthenic principles, but there is an extra cost. A lot of effort. The fact that we use stuff that you didn't know about, like aspect-oriented programming, and we didn't finish it. I mean, there is still stuff to do, but again, I'm lazy. So the question is it worth it? And I leave up to you to answer that question. My take on this is you should be pragmatic. I'm super pragmatic. What's the point of using a framework if at every step of the way you have to fight against it? If you use Spring, just do what Spring does. You don't like it? Don't use Spring. Do your own stuff. Reinvent the wheel if you want, if you need, if you believe that it's better. But if you use a framework, embrace it. See how it works, use its features, and don't try to fight it, please. So thanks for listening to me. You can read my blog. You can follow me on Twitter. You can, of course, check the Git repo and have fun with yourself. Well, no. No, it's the second time I do this sentence. I should remove it. Have fun with it yourself. And there is also this nice post that I wrote that explains also what I just tried to explain you, so if you want to remember and don't want to go through all the video. I believe we still have a bit of time for questions. So I will be happy to have questions. Yes?
I'm glad that you brought out the cons of this approach. Can you just once more go over, since I came in a bit late, what are the pros of embracing Spring using the aspect-oriented programming to do things this way, whereas you could...
Spring by default, like for ages, it's changing a bit right now, but for ages told you controller, services, repositories, or the arrows. Business logic is in the service layer. If you use Spring and try to put the logic in your domain objects, you need to do a lot of extra work, of extra complexity, or benefits that, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, a lot of people are saying, hey, let's do OOP because it makes the code more readable. I can show you a lot of real OP code which is completely unreadable. It's more maintainable. Well, show me the proof. Where are the studies? In the end, I believe a lot of the, hey, let's do object-oriented programming or let's do functional programming because, I mean, every programming, they are very like rigid, dogmatic thing that their approach is the only one that works, but none of them showed me any real proof. Some is based on common sense. Like, yes, for functions, for example, it's easier to test if you have no side effects. And yes, it's better to have like immutable objects. For sure, I agree. But whether the code is more maintainable, it's debatable. And again, that's the problem in our industry is there are not many studies based on real-world projects. And a lot of like people, perhaps in labs, doing the research, but they are in their own like universe. And a lot of like prophets saying, hey, you should do this because this is what works. I would really be happy if everybody here would start thinking whether in one's own context it makes sense to be more OP or to be more Spring or to use Java EE or whatever. I told it multiple times, I'm super lazy. I don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. I'm super happy with what Spring offers me because then I can really focus on the business logic. Where you put it in the services layer or in the objects, I don't care that much, actually. If everybody on your team is a Spring developers, know the Spring framework, is happy with Spring, why should you fight this trend? On the opposite, if you have people saying, hey, all frameworks are shit, I hate that stuff, I want to do everything by myself, which I believe is a very bad way to. But, I mean, if I am in such a context, I wouldn't advocate for Spring. It would be just too much effort. If you already have a team that works in that way and it works for them, that's fine. Yes?
Yeah, there is one, I would say it's a comment, it's not a question. On Slack, maybe you would like to give your opinion on that?
Yes, sure.
It says OOP in Java is still not true OOP. Yes, it's about having objects that are fully encapsulated, have their own garbage collection, but they are also running on their own threads and communication with each other purely through messages passing. Erlang implements OOP really well as an example.
Okay, so I don't know Erlang, and in the object-oriented model, there is nothing about threads or whatever. It's just like the OP model is really, really simple. It's just like this object that passes a message to this other object. Whether you implement the message passing through actors or through API call or through whatever, it's not said. I mean, again, you shouldn't be very rigid in what you think. Like, hey, let's do functional programming because we are immutable. Guess what? You can do that in Java too. Your object can be immutable in Java. Yes, it takes a bit more, let's say, effort than in other languages that are made for that, but it's possible. And it's not because you have getters and setters. Oh, no, just if you have just like final fields with getters in Java, does that make your object immutable? Only getters, final fields. Who says it makes my object immutable? Who says it doesn't make my object immutable? Guys, Switzerland again. So the answer is no, it doesn't make your object immutable, because if your final field is of type list, for example, and you have a getter, then you get the list and you can add stuff to the collection. So it's not because you only have getters and final fields that your object is immutable. That's why it's a bit harder in Java than in other languages. But it doesn't prevent you from applying defensive programming where you only return a copy of the object. So everything is possible. Yes?
Do you think that it's a good practice, good design to put services into entities? That's what you did.
No, I didn't. I removed the services layer.
No, but you injected
The repository.
Yes, yes. Again, I wanted to show you, I'm not saying that you should do it. My point is it's possible. So you can remove the service layer and you can put all the business logic that you want, or every logic that you want, into the entity. It's possible. Whether that makes sense in your context depends on you. I'm not your guru here. I'm just trying to raise awareness and to make you question yourself. I don't come with a ready-made solution. Again, what really makes me angry is that in our industry, we are supposed to be like scientific. We are supposed to be engineers. We are supposed to think a lot. And then somebody who's well-known writes a piece and everybody follows him blindly. TDD. Hey, everybody should do TDD. I mean, Robert Martin says you should have 100% code coverage because everybody does TDD. I mean, in real-world projects, that's crap. Doesn't mean anything. Really. Might be that in your context, 100% code coverage is not the right one. Perhaps it's too much. Perhaps it's not enough, because you can have 100% code coverage, 100% line coverage, and branch coverage, and still not have every corner case covered. So this is just crap. And people are following this. And you find people saying, hey, 100% code coverage, that's the only coverage you should have. Sorry, I completely disagree. And if you are interested, I can show you why and how and whatever. But just think by yourself. OP is not the end of all problems. Spring is not the end of all problems. It depends on your context. And I don't know your context. So I can only encourage you to think by yourself, to say, okay, in my context, because I'm working on a very small project where everybody is an OP guru, then yes, let's do everything and let's have those not frameworks, but those little libraries and assemble them by ourselves, and we are super proud we did something. But for some bigger projects, we don't have to think or whatever, then just apply the lasagna layered architecture and it works super well. I mean, there are a lot of projects that were delivered with Spring and they are quite okay. Yeah, reality is harder than just black and white. Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.